Something was spilt by my mother-in-law, odd into my beverage when she believed that it wasn't searching for a unique cocktail for my, she said, my favorite son-in-law. With I thanked her with a grin and in private, exchanged glasses with her spouse, who always made fun of my 45-minute career later. I'm 32 years old and go by Julian Mercer, seasoned independent photographer with a base in Asheville, North Carolina. I have constructed my weddings, wildlife, and business from Nothing magazine to disseminate the type of content that covers your bills, and I'm good at it. But to my in-laws, Diane in particular, my work has never been nevertheless. How is the small photography? Gerald would inquire about his hobby over family meals, not even attempting to conceal his contempt. He was the type of man who worked as an investment banker, who used square footage as a measure of success, and stock choices for each Sunday meal at their home was identical to what Diane would worry about her daughter, while Gerald questioned me regarding my financial situation. Haley, my wife, would grip my hand beneath a silent apology for her at the table parents I had been working on a wildlife project, slogging through Montana for the entire week knee snow to take pictures of bison for National Geographic. I was worn out, yet Haley emphasized that we couldn't let her go. Mother's Day dinner in a few hours, she said. I ought to have heard that knot in my abdomen as Diane positioned me into the way her gaze flitted about the kitchen prior to her giving me the drink, that she spoke with a small tremor in her fingers. I created something unique only for you. Wasn't correct. I simply couldn't figure out how incorrect. Haley and I were on the verge of meeting at an art show 6 years ago, when she was highlighted in my work, completing her environmental master's degree science, and I was only beginning to build a name for myself, and we clicked right away. She recognized that I needed to record the world through a prism, and I found her admirable love for defending it. Her parents added an additional tale from our initial. Gerald made it apparent throughout the meeting that he had anticipated a new individual for his daughter who works at a desk job retirement plan, a business vehicle, or someone. Diane was subtler than he was, and she'd compliment my images and inquire as to when I make plans to move into a stable environment. Then she would invite me to family events. Instead, identify me as a photographer. Of her, I tried to win them over for years. Son-in-law, I would bring pricey wine to dinner. Show them the mention of your published work. High-profile customers. Nothing altered their belief that I was only temporary a stage in their daughter's life. She outgrew me at Christmas last year. Haley could hear Diane on the phone. You know orthopedics. You're married to Thomas. Surgeon's family funds. But she opted for the imaginative one. As evidenced by her previous pause, creative gave the impression that it was an illness. Gerald was more straightforward with Haley and me. Declared that we were attempting to conceive. Drag me aside from that. Kids can be costly, son. Consider actual employment first. Introducing one into the world. I never mentioned these things to Haley. Despite their differences, she adored her parents' imperfections, and I didn't want to make her select a side. So I grinned and shook Gerald's every visit. A firm hand is commended. I didn't think about anything but Diane's cooking, myself, but there were indications that I ought to have given greater weight to Diane's would want Haley's assistance in the kitchen. Every time I discuss a successful illustrate how she can unintentionally leave out Gerald and I from family photos at the time recommended treatment for Haley's impetuous choices, while staring at me squarely. I disregarded everything, believing that time would ultimately lead to acknowledgement that I was mistaken. Diane's birthday supper on Friday returned with a raw wind blast from Montana, cheeks, and an image-rich memory card that would cover 3 months' worth of our mortgage. Despite being exhausted, I took a shower and put on a drove us to her wearing a button-down shirt. Colonial-style residence of the parents in the costly component of Gerald's town, supper began as usual. Spoke about a recent transaction in which Diane fussed. Over Haley's brother's table arrangements, Owen and Vanessa, his spouse, created courteous discussion. I drank a beer, and I counted the minutes till we were able to depart following the main course. Diane declared that she had created her well-known sangria. She vanished into the dessert area, kitchen, and I volunteered to assist with carrying. I noticed that she had 2 pairs of spectacles. Separate the glasses from the others, as she hurriedly added something from a tiny vial was placed into one of them, but it had no color and no garnish or flavor. Fragranceless, and she put the vial away. As soon as she heard my footsteps, Julian, I've got you covered. Too optimistically, this one's for you. Unique recipe for my favorite, my throat constricted the glass, son-in-law. Had a hardly noticeable floating film. Let me assist you in catching the light on top. I said, you carry these, accepting both, glasses as Gerald was getting ready in the dining room. He was hardly looking up as he checked his phone. When I went up to Sangria, sir, and put the tainted glass before him instead. I watched him drink instead of taking it myself. Claiming to like water as an excuse, along with my dessert, Gerald was pallid 45 minutes later, perspiring and hurrying to the loo. His illness's harsh noises reverberated. Diane's face was exhausted as she walked up the stairs. Reddish hue when she became aware of what had occurred. Her gaze locked with mine across the table. And I immediately recognized two things with complete assurance. Mine an attempt to poison me. My mother-in-law, she was aware that I didn't respond. Simply ate my food without confronting her. Chocolate dessert as Haley hurried to see how her father is doing. In the confusion that ensued after Gerald claiming that it had to be food Diane was poisoned, stuttering about negative, I discreetly pocketed the shellfish. For me, the untouched glass represented something. Had changed the rage I felt inside of me. Was cool rather than hot or explosive. Purposeful. I wasn't going to let I wasn't intending to fight. But this went either way. I was going to create them confront who they truly were. After dinner on Monday, I took the glass to Jason, a previous customer who operated a poisonous personal or professional psychology lab. When I explained what I needed, he inquired. I responded, family matter. 3 days later, and there were benzodiazepines when I called Julian. Nothing deadly, but sufficient in that sip, perhaps to render someone unconscious for hours, induce a loss of memory. Where did you obtain? I thanked him for this and requested AI didn't respond to his written report. Query that evening. I informed Haley I wanted to take a break from Sunday supper. Stated that I had to concentrate on an impending EX. She felt let down, yet realized that I didn't inform her about the test findings not yet. I required additional details. Initially, over the following 2 weeks, I conducted some research, and Diane had a Xanax prescription from 3 she had been double dating with several doctors, then increasing her dosage 3-fold for years there in town. There were also rumors about her. Odd behavior at a gathering hosted by a neighbor charges of jewelry theft against her stories from her family's country club put a lot of effort into burying what I compiled. I waited for my moment, and everything appeared when Haley brought up her mother, required images for a social networking account. She particularly inquired as to whether you would take Haley express surprise at the request. I concurred, and on Saturday of the following week, I showed up at their residence with just a camera bag, a sealed envelope with one hand. Another Diane was waiting, dressed. Gerald was using costly cosmetics to look flawless. Before we began, she gave us an overview of the office. Silently, I murmured, I thought you would want. I gave her the envelope so she could view this, including the toxicological report in addition to with copies of her numerous prescriptions, and her hand shook while this is ridiculous, she muttered. Would I cut? But neither of us knows what happened. Her off, but I'm not sure why. Face hardened. You are unworthy of no. My daughter, you will never be a man. Ought to offer protection rather than photos, and using drugs on your daughter's security is provided by my husband. Therefore, I kept my voice level. It wouldn't cause you any harm. She snapped only to make you feel ill. Don't miss that absurd gallery opening. You have been discussing this for months. Let Haley know you're untrustworthy. I allowed that to settle in. What comes next? I said, at last, you're then going to explain what you did to Gerald. Both of you will begin to take advantage of me, with deference, not because you've altered your opinion of me, but because the another option is for Haley to ascertain the precise Diane chuckle when asked who her parents are, although it seemed hollow. I wouldn't believe you. Above, I may have picked up my camera bag. Not, but the lab report will convince her, as well as the prescription data. And are you the neighbors you've alienated? Willing to risk your connection with your daughter on that I departed without bringing any picture from the evening Diane phoned Haley and crying, and saying that I had acted unsuitably throughout our meeting, said I had been antagonistic and menacing when Haley approached me. I was unable to conceal the truth anymore. I gave her everything. Prescriptions are reported by the lab Even her mother's text messages that had grown more antagonistic over my mother wouldn't do this for years. Continued, but her tone lacked conviction the next day. She faced I wasn't present with her parents, but when her eyes were red when she got home from my father's sobs and claims it's all a misunderstanding. She said that attempting to cause a rift between us due to your lack of confidence in your career, I simply nodded, anticipating this. What do you suppose I asked her that she didn't? Answer simply turned and crawled into bed. I had pushed back away from me, yet in some manner I had now fallen farther into their trap. Was their story's antagonist, and they had succeeded in casting doubt on the one individual whose viewpoint was most important to for 2 weeks. Haley hardly spoke to me at all. She arrived at her parents' house by herself. Returning with fresh skepticism and burning eyes, I poured myself into my work and spent a lot of time waiting for the storm for hours in my studio to pass. And then I received a gift. Only my name scrolling in the return address across the top in a strange script, there was a message and a USB disc inside. Vanessa, you should notice this verbal quote. The video was on Owen's wife's disc. Records Gerald's home security footage with the timestamps from Diane's home. Diane was present on the evening of the dinner. Clearly adding something to the kitchen, I was going in for a drink. Taking Gerald was sipping from the glasses there, because the glass was tampered with. But there was additional video from after we left Diane yelling at Gerald and accusing him of Gerald. You're drinking from the incorrect glass. Retaliating with a shout is not new. You did something similar to this. I viewed the video 3 times in an attempt to comprehend what I was witnessing, not merely verification of Diane's behavior, but proof that there's a trend. Gerald was aware that the following file was from 2 days following the meal. Diane and Gerald complained about me in their living room. Is aware of what you've done, Gerald said. Therefore, Diane's response is his word. Haley will never pick him over me, over her relatives, and if she does, Diane remarked, not the daughter I raised. Don't worry, I've already begun, icily, discussing their marriage with her issues with seating by the time I'm completed. She intends to file for divorce, and believing that it was her idea, I closed my laptop with trembling hands. Was more than simply me. It was a methodical attempt to manage Haley's life, to keep her away from everybody who didn't align with their goals, and they have been I call Vanessa after years of doing it. Why did you email this to me right away? Because they treated me in the same manner. She remarked softly when I married Owen. For 2 years, they attempted to separate us. Claimed I wasn't nearly good enough. Owen, why didn't you inform us that you worked? Is unaware that she acknowledged that he worships his father, accepts all of his statements. I've attempted to inform him, but he believes I was too paranoid to see them do the following day. I gave it to someone else. Gerald texted us to let us know that we should talk to men instead of women. I met him at his country club. Spouses. Was drinking while waiting in a separate room. Julian Bourbon started families are complex. My wife can be challenging, protective, but she intends to do drugs. I asked someone who meant well, and he waved his hand with contempt. A misunderstanding. Diane takes medicine for anxiousness. She most likely confused that I have the security footage, glasses. Gerald's expression altered in an instant, solidifying into a chilly substance, and figuring out what this is about wanting money, isn't it? I've known that you married Haley for monetary reasons. I said, I want you both to leave us alone. Just quit attempting to persuade Haley that I'm not good enough. Quit meddling with our Gerald leaned forward in the marriage you believe. This is our first encounter with someone who wants to take. Like you, he made fun of our family. Haley will return to her home where she belongs. Always inquires about before. Thomas asked her about the fiancé. I was chilly. What are you saying? Before they met, Haley was already engaged. You're a kind man, doctor. But we didn't enjoy as it took us 6 months to persuade the background. She broke it, and he was wrong for her. Came home in tears and grinned at Daddy. History is repeated. So I called Haley's on the way home. Bethany, her college roommate, inquired about, oh my God, Thomas. She said that was terrible, was ideal for her. However, her parents convinced her that he was unfaithful. Indication that he made an effort to be honest with her, but she had lost faith in him by then. No longer. The pattern was evident. Was about more than just myself. It was about total authority over their daughter's life. and they had succeeded. I didn't confront Haley before. Instead, I began gathering right away. Every bit of proof I could locate contacted Thomas, who was originally unwilling to talk to me when I described the circumstances. He sent me an old emails he exchanged with Haley demonstrating how her parents had methodically weakened their connection. I reached out to other Haley's old acquaintances and ex-boyfriends who had inexplicably disappeared. A pattern appeared for everybody who supported Haley's self-reliance was progressively forced to leave her life. Vanessa gave more security. Footage demonstrating Diane and Gerald talking on what they have planned for us will persuade her to do so after their divorce. In one footage, Gerald remarked, "Go back home. She can manage the foundation and meet the necessary men." I put everything on one page. Drive, after which I invited Vanessa and Owen to join you for supper without letting Haley know I was going to ruin her family's reputation. During dessert, I linked my laptop to "You both need something from our TV." I mentioned that over the next hour, Haley sat with him as they viewed the video. Owen kept her still, her face blanched. "That's not mine," he muttered, shaking his head. Parents, while muttering to himself, when it was Haley, turned to me and started crying, gushing down her face. "Why did you not inform me? I needed you to visit me sooner because I told you everything, not just what I was harmed by them, but what they have been causing you to suffer all your life." Owen stood enraged. "This is what these movies were modified, but my parents when Vanessa touched his arm. So they did this. It to us as well. Owen, why do you believe they began to show interest in me after we had James? Because they had a grandchild. Had used the color that was removed from Owen's, you never told me that I tried her face. Muttered that you went later that evening." Haley crawled. "I need time to get into bed next to me. Think about this," she added quietly. "But I believe you, and I apologize for my skepticism." Diane contacted Haley the following morning and put "I was thinking about her" on speaker. "Sweetie, you ought to spend some time with us." Diane said, "Your father and I are happy. Are you concerned that your marriage is difficult?" And isolation can occasionally provide Haley, Clarity's mother, interrupted. "I've watched the videos, but what recordings of your security footage drugging Dad and you and Julian's drink conspiring to end my marriage in another way stop whatever he's shown you? Haley, you are aware that Julian has been duped. I've always envied our family." Stop. Haley said firmly, "We're coming over. All of us, Owen, Vanessa, and Julian. Tonight, and I are going to discuss this as no longer a family." After she ended the call, Haley turned to "They will attempt everything to deny me, to make this work against you." I nodded. "No. So what is our strategy for the initial time in weeks?" That I grinned. "I believe it's time for your parents to encounter the real me, the one who doesn't merely capture pictures, but are able to identify a tale from the evening we got at Gerald and my camera at Diane's place equipment that Owen and Vanessa already had in the living room." They were seated rigidly. Gerald appeared as certain that I am aware that there's been no miscommunication. I stopped assembling my tripod. "I'm recording this discussion for the family." Diane was instantly opposed to this in the archives. "It is exactly a private family business. I am family, and we have a family business. Despite the fact that you have made every effort to shift, that we lay everything out for following 2 hours. Tom, get the drink out of the way." The pattern that the other ex-boyfriends has influenced the whole lives of Haley and Owen. Diane and Gerald denied all of I was labeled unstable and manipulative by the course. But I played another denial with each one. The clip displayed their faces in another email. Eventually, their denials became weaker and pallid. Haley sprang to her feet, saying, "You too are my parents, but your actions are unforgivable. You have no authority over my." Owen nodded. "We're grown-ups now. Select our own partners and our own course." Diane began to cry, but not because of regret. However, after learning that she was Gerald, lost control and simply looked, stunned, as though unable to understand, that his kids were refusing to as we were about to part. I gave him, Gerald, a USB drive, which is all the video, emails, and testimony. It's yours to hold on. "What does that mean?" that he inquired. "It suggests that I'm not going to share this and destroy your reputation with anybody else who could cause Haley harm." And I hesitated. "But I would never do it. If you ever attempt to meddle in our marriage, once more, if you ever attempt to control Haley, criticize me, Copies will be distributed to each member of your country, club, your business associates, and your priceless social for the first time since we first met. I circled Gerald, gave me a glance that said I didn't give you the respect you deserved. Yes, I said simply. You after 6 months. Haley and Owen started therapy to repair the harm Diane's and Gerald's parents had caused them to sending sporadic texts from a distance, but honoring the limits we'd founded. And over the holidays, they invited everyone to supper for a new beginning. Haley wanted to go, according to the invitation. They're still my parents, she remarked. I agreed to try, but I wasn't gullible. Enough to think they've changed. Everything appeared normal when we got there. Gerald was served a feast that Diane had prepared. Charming, inquiring about my most recent endeavors. With what seemed to be authentic, Gerald asked me to join him after supper. In his research, I have a suggestion for. He poured me a scotch and said, You've been considering your career. The photography has been going great. But have you given any thought to by expanding? I may include you and my junior partners in the firm monitor the pay. Would be significant. I did not take the glass. Why would you drink in front of your family? He stated smoothly, and I admire the way you manage to use shielded my daughter from unpleasantness, while maintaining your position, which is what a true man should. I put down the glass. Unaltered, I'm grateful for the offer. But no, Julian's smile tightened. Reasonable. This is a way to extend an olive branch. For us to proceed, no. I did again. Here's another effort at Gerald. You can't buy me control. The fact that Haley loves me is unbearable. Just like me, don't be a fool. He dropped everyone's facade with a hiss. I got up, and that's where you are. Incorrect, which is why you'll never recognize your. I strolled back to the dining room. Daughter. Room where Diane displayed a picture of Haley albums? Check these out, she said. Were ecstatic when you were living at home. I looked across the room at Haley. Could tell by my expression that I gave a little hint that something had happened. Gnawed, and she got up, Mom and Dad. Made it plain that I had something to tell. Everyone looked at her, and we, Julian and I, are 3 months along with our kid. The look of surprise on their faces when pregnant was when the real Diane recovered. She hurried to hold her daughter while crying. Gerald's eyes moved closer, more slowly. Looking from me to Haley, congratulations, he responded firmly. You and I answered. Then lower my voice to just he heard that this youngster will never be. I guarantee you will use a pawn in your games. That he nodded despite his face becoming hard. As soon as he realized the message while we were driving home that evening, Haley gave me a squeeze. Hand, they won't ever alter. I told them the truth, but they'll have to acknowledge that we obtained a certified letter 3 weeks later. Came from Gerald's lawyer. Inside was a deed to our residence, which we have been renting and filing paperwork. Setting up a trust fund for our unborn child. There was no condition, no note, and strings, only the asset transfer pristine and unchangeable. It wasn't, and Gerald was unable to offer an apology. However, it might have been an acknowledgement. The only one we had that he could provide one, and in the summer, our daughter was born. Gave her the name Eliza in honor of my grandmother. Gerald and Diane arrived that they brought gifts to the hospital, but kept a respectable distance from each other. Said took pictures of the infant and departed. Without attempting to provide us with parenting guidance or months of financial lectures, outlived our connection with them, seated themselves in something that looked like typically. They never expressed regret for what they did. But they gave up on trying to manage Haley's life or jeopardize my one evening. While I was editing for my profession, Haley entered my studio to take pictures. Carrying Eliza when my mother called, she expressed her desire for us. I looked up to come for Christmas. What would you like to do with my computer? Believe we ought to depart, she said, but with circumstances in which we stay in a hotel. Not there when we want to leave the house. We don't unify time with Eliza, which seemed logical. Down next to me, softly bouncing the infant. I used to believe that success meant making my parents happy by obtaining their approval and meeting with their anticipations. And she now glanced down at our daughter, then came back to me, and I now understand. It's about making decisions of which I am proud. Of supporting those 2 weeks prior to Christmas. A big Gerald sent an envelope, and inside was a beautiful pamphlet for his businesses. My photos for the yearly report were featured in all the landscape portraits, architectural photos of the projects. I worked on my own terms. Free from his meddling, a brief, the best photographer I know was recruited by note. I assumed you would want a copy of it. Wasn't it reconciliation or forgiveness? Was there another aspect of respect, possibly the recognition that I achieved an accomplishment on my terms, not his? And I didn't call thank you. Both of us realized that this wasn't about thankfulness. It was about acknowledging the new limits, the new reality. I opened my own that April. Downtown Gallery, Haley stood at the grand opening in Ville. Eliza on my parents' hip, next to me, arrived by plane from friends and clients in Oregon. Filled the room, taking in the pictures Gerald and Diane were caught over the years. Arrived around the end of the evening as well. Diane held Eliza for a little period of time. Momentarily under Haley's careful observation, Gerald nodded and shook my hand at the images with sincere approval and departed without offering any recommendations. Regarding how I ought to manage my company, Haley inquired, as we were locking up that evening. Do you believe that they've altered? I gave the question some thought. Meticulously, no, I said at last, but they've acknowledged that they are powerless to alter us, and occasionally, that's eventually, we sat on our porch, observing the stars emerge above. Eliza is sleeping in her cot in the Highlands. I discovered something upstairs that I've never completely expressed prior to my victory. I had won the game played by Gerald and Diane. I'd stood by not playing at all. What mattered was safeguarded by my ground, and constructed my life in accordance with my own definition of success that does not involve plots or deceit, but with integrity and quiet perseverance ultimately proved to be the most fulfilling kind of retaliation life, comfortably on my terms with the family by my side that I loved.